is the Spit Sports Show. We finally have some hockey stuff to talk about. I mean, do you guys remember, like, as soon as the season ended, it was widely reported by everybody that this was going to be a legendary offseason with unprecedented acquisitions and it's been garbage. I mean, Marner going to Vegas, that was cool for like a week, but kind of everyone and their mother thought he was going to leave Toronto anyways. There haven't been many surprises. Everyone just kind of re-signed. So it's been very sad for me because I haven't had much to talk about. But the NHL media tour has begun. Players are going around Europe and North America. I don't know if they're going to Asia, but all around the world to basically promote the game, talk about the season. And one of those players who has been opening his mouth a bit players are the Hughes brothers. And this has turned into a story because, of course, it has. But basically what happened was Jack Hughes, who is an awesome forward on the New Jersey Devils, he was asked if he wanted to play with his brother Quinn at some point in his career. Now, from how it was written, it seems like he was pondering giving the not the political answer, but the hockey player answer of, it's kind of out of my control and if the cards fall that way, I'd love to see the guy on the other side of the ice is a great competitor. No, no, no. He said, "Yes, I would love to play with my brother one day. I'm not afraid to say it. Um, Guy is sick. He's my brother. I'd like to play with him." And again, how does that not make total sense? And Quinn quickly repeated it when he was asked the next day about the question. Yes, I would like to play with Jack as well. Why is this breaking news? I don't know. Like, that's the question that I have too. Two brothers who are both nasty at hockey want to play together at some point in their careers. It makes sense on the ice, off the ice. It was such a big story for no reason that Quinn Hughes was basically asked if he was surprised that this turned into a thing. And he said yes and no. Obviously, Jack wasn't the first one to bring it up, in fairness to him. Now, who is he referring to that he wasn't the first one to bring it up? Well, I am here to break the news that it was Jim Rutherford, I want to say he's the executive director of hockey ops or president, or he's a high up guy, higher up than the GM. And he brought it up at one of his many therapy sessions, press conferences, where he basically said, in regarding Quinn Hughes' future, we're going to do everything we can to keep him, but there are going to be external factors like the fact he might want to play with his brother. First of all, that was dumb that he ever brought that up. I said it as soon as he said it. Why would you even put that into the ether as the president of the team that Hughes is currently on? It made no sense. But what also makes no sense is that Hughes's contract is a story right now. Like, I understand he is the son of the Vancouver Canucks in that everything revolves around him. He is the franchise player. He is one of inarguably the 10 best players in hockey. You can argue he's one of the 5 best. It'd be a tough argument after that. Actually, would it? I feel like he's one of the 5 best players. We can have a debate about, but I digress. He's awesome, but he's not eligible to sign an extension. He's eligible to sign an extension next summer. So this whole story is really just a lead in to what's going to happen next offseason when we're going to have seen a full season of what the Canucks are able to do. And Quinn basically said as much. He said along the lines of, I don't have the quote verbatim, but we'll see how the season goes. If it goes well, contract negotiations will probably be pretty smooth. If it doesn't, it's going to be an even bigger piss storm than it already is now. So, what are the Canucks doing to make sure that they are icing a competitive roster every single season that Quinn Hughes is here so he will commit to this franchise long term? Well, I'm asking myself that same question. It has been reported internally that they have concerns over their second line center position. And in my opinion, those concerns are absolutely valid. So, a lot of different trade options and, well, free agent signing options first, but then all of those got taken off the board. So, Mason McTavish has been a rumor around Vancouver's second line slot, but it's been pretty widely reported and accepted that the Ducks don't want to trade McTavish right now. Even if they did, which in my opinion, it makes no sense for them to trade McTavish right now, considering they're still in the middle of a rebuild and McTavish is still young enough to kind of be a part of that young core. The Canucks don't have the pieces to get him. They have a middling prospect pool at best and not a lot of cap space. Add on to the fact that the Canucks aren't the only team aggressively pursuing a second line center right now. The Montreal Canadiens are all in on being a contender within the next 2 to 3 years. And they have a bit of a hole at second line center as well. It's been widely reported that they are pushing hard to find that guy. So, in other words, a magic wand is not appearing for the Vancouver Canucks this offseason. They're going to have to, at some point mid year, find a team that might be struggling a bit more than they thought they would coming into the season, that would be willing to sell off one of their pieces either at the trade deadline or ideally, my goodness gracious me, I haven't even been talking that much today, and anyways, ideally before the trade deadline, because I know that trade deadline acquisitions, they have worked out in the past, but it's always better to get that player on your team as quick as possible so you can establish lines and chemistry and just overall fitting a big piece, because a second line center is a big piece into your roster. Now, I hate to even say this because it's the obvious and I've talked about it a million times, but they did have a guy that filled this exact role to perfection in JT Miller. And because of, in my opinion, complete mismanagement and a feud that he had with another one of the Canucks' best players and a million other locker room issues that haven't been reported, they had to trade him. So they've created this hole for themselves. I want to establish that. But there are a couple players that I was looking at that in the season could be really, really interesting acquisitions if the Canucks are in a good enough position to feel that they can make a move that would make them a contender, potentially. Because I think this team has the back end to be a contender, which I'll get into in a little bit. But the team that I first looked at is Pittsburgh. Now, they are, I think, in full rebuild mode even with Sidney Crosby still on that team, it seems as though they're focusing on getting younger. Crosby's trade rumors have been their own thing, but obviously he's not, excuse me, coming to the Canucks. But they have a couple of interesting options there. One of them is Tommy Novak. Now, Tommy Novak is probably ideally a third line center on a cup winning team, but he can definitely fit into that second line center role with the Canucks, especially considering Philip Hedl is also kind of a third, second line hybrid center. They can kind of flip it there. He's also only making $3.5 million a year, which is not a whole lot. And I think a pretty good deal for someone like Novak, who's just a solid all around player. The other one that is more interesting, probably a bit more pie in the sky, but his contract makes it so it's not as pie in the sky as you might think. Evgeny Malkin. Now, he's probably going to retire in Pittsburgh. He definitely deserves to. But in his and Crosby's partnership, Crosby is the Lemieux and Malkin is the Yager. And we know Jaromir Jagr did not stay with the Penguins. Now, Jaromir Jagr went to 17 different NHL franchises, 6 different KHL franchises, a couple different European franchises, and a partridge in a pear tree. Now, I'm not saying Malkin is going to do that necessarily, but he only has 1 year left on a $6.1 million contract. That is the ideal contract to acquire a rental at, because it's again 1 year, and then after that you're not on the hook for any of it. You can re-sign him in negotiations for hopefully a lesser price. And I think Malkin has a lot more in the tank than some people think. Obviously, he's not the skater he once was. He's not quite as explosive. But what Malkin does have is a huge frame, incredible puck skills, hockey IQ that is just top of the league still. I think he can really impact winning even at the later stages of his career. If Pittsburgh is willing to move on from him fitting into that second line center role for the Canucks would be unbelievable. Now, do they have the cap space to do that even for a year? I don't know. Probably, maybe. They'd have to get rid of some other pieces if they can fit it in. But that to me is the most interesting. Another one that's really interesting, though, is if Nashville continues on their incredible year last year of just how do you even describe Nashville's season last year? Tire fire, I guess I'll go with. If that continues this season, I could see Ryan O'Reilly potentially being up for grabs. Now, he's making $4.5 million, which is less than Evgeny Malkin. And he would be just an ideal two-way fit behind Pedersen on that second line spot, win faceoffs, just an overall winner. Now, the price for him is probably going to be a lot because, again, I think he's on a pretty reasonable contract. So you're going to have to give a bit. And again, all of these are very, like, you're going to have to give to get. Like, that's just how this league works. The other one that's interesting to me, and this is the most pie in the sky that I thought of, but if St. Louis takes a step back, and listen, I have nothing but respect for what the Blues did last year. They earned a playoff spot, but let's be honest, like that team wasn't that good. They got hot at the right time, more power to them. But if they take a step back this season, which again, I can anticipate, Braden Shen could be interesting. Now, he is probably the best player that I've suggested. He's the most expensive player I've suggested, both in contract and how much it would take to get him. But holy moly, just that is heaven for Canucks fans, having Braden Shen backing up EP. He might even be the first line center. I think Braden Shen's one of the more underrated players in the entire NHL because he plays for St. Louis and because he's been, on a bunch of not as well talked about nationally squads. That would be really, really interesting. Now, initially for this season, the Canucks are going to have to solve the second line center problem internally. And I do think that Philip Hedl has the talent to be that guy. He is so fast for a guy of his height and body build. He can create possessions in the offensive zone by himself. He can work the puck through the neutral zone. He's a good give and go type player, but his injury concerns are concerning. And the reason why, it's not like it's been, a toe injury and then he hurts a wrist and then, lower body injury. He's had a consistent problem with concussions. And the thing about concussions is they can force you to straight up retire from the NHL, as we've seen with Eric Lindros back in the day, and there have been other examples. But the more concussions you get, the longer you're going to have to stay out. So your first concussion, you're probably out for, a week. The second concussion, you're out for a couple weeks, and so on and so on. It builds on each other. That is very, very concerning. And it's obviously something that internally the Canucks are concerned about as well. How could they not be? Speaking of injuries, though, I think the future of Quinn Hughes in Vancouver may rest on the knee of Thatcher Demko. Now, I think Demko is going to be awesome this season. Not just because he signed a big extension and he has the comfort of committing to a team long term now. One thing that I know as an athlete, and listen, I want to be perfectly clear after saying something as egregious as that. I am nowhere near the level of a pro athlete. Put that on record. But I did play sports all my life at a pretty high level. So I do know what I'm talking about a bit here. Healthy off seasons are such an underrated thing as an athlete in any sport. Being able to train and hone your craft and perfect details and find out things about your skill set that you didn't know before and work with a coach is such a huge difference between rehabilitating an injury throughout the offseason. And by all accounts, that's what he was doing last offseason, just nursing his knee, not really able to get better. And it looked like it in the year. I thought he played fine when he had the chances to, but having a healthy offseason for Demko is going to be massive. Absolutely massive. Add on to that the fact that he is behind, again, I mentioned this earlier, one of the best decors in the entire league. This conversation started around how awesome Quinn Hughes is. I'm not going to get more into that. He's the best. Filip Hronek has established himself as a great partner for Hughes on that top line. Marcus Pettersson might be my favorite player on the entire team. Not kidding. Guy just doesn't make mistakes. He's so good at moving the puck and phenomenal defensively. Tyler Myers has improved like crazy under Adam Foote. And sidebar, just the addition of Foote as the head coach now after being kind of the defensive guy last year, you would think that would help the overall team defense. You know, when a defensive coordinator gets hired for a head coaching spot in the NFL, typically their defense gets better. I don't know if that's going to happen for sure, but, you know, common sense would say so. And then for the other guys coming up, Elias Pettersson, Elias Niels Pettersson, other PD, whatever you want to call him, he's a very, very intriguing prospect back there who I thought had a really, really solid season last year. Derek Forbert is just kind of your typical veteran bottom six defenseman, physical guy. And then Tom Willander might be able to find his way somewhere onto this roster at some point. I mean, I have my doubts, but he's in the pool for sure. So with that, I think the Canucks actually have a very solid floor for this season, which is a good thing. It also isn't, though, because this goes back to my not most popular, but probably the philosophy most well known with me at this point, which is the worst place to be in sports is what I call the mediocrity zone, where you're not a contender. You have no chance realistically of winning the big one, but you're also not bad enough to bottom out, get good picks, build a prospect pool. You're always barely making the playoffs. If you do, you're going to get waxed in the first round or barely missing them. To me, that is the worst spot to be in all of sports. And it's the spot the Canucks have been in for really the past decade. So, with that floor established on the defensive end, it is going to come down to that forward core. A lot of it is going to be on Pettersson, and if he can get back to that 90, 100 point, you know, first line dominant center that he was a couple of years ago. But it's also going to rely on Brock Besser improving his skating a little bit. It's going to rely on Jake DeBrusk having a similar season to what he did last year. It's going to rely on Connor Garland taking probably yet another step in the direction of being a high scoring contributor to this team. And again, as we started this video with, it's probably going to require an arm and a leg for a big trade throughout the offseason. So I actually think the Canucks are in a good spot going into this season if they're able to manage it correctly, which authentically I have no faith in them to do. But listen, I'm going to stay optimistic. Again, Quinn Hughes, that's a conversation for next offseason. It really is. For now, the Canucks have a solid floor with their decor, and it's going to be all on the shoulders of probably those top two lines to create scoring. And if they do, I don't want to say the Canucks are definitely a contender, but they absolutely could be. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I want to know, what do you guys think the Canucks are going to be able to do this season? How many wins? Are they going to be cup contenders, playoff contenders, miss the playoffs? Let me know in the comments below. I am small enough as to where I can read all comments and love doing so drop something down there. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard. Please subscribe if you really enjoyed it. The Spit Sports Show just hit over 400 subscribers. Big things happening on this channel. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out. I love you guys.